So this is the Sony NP-FZ100, a battery that hasn't been replaced in 6 years. And that's why I was so excited when I heard SmallRig was making a replacement that on paper has 5% more capacity, USB-C port on the battery for charging, and is cheaper than the original Sony battery. And if you know anything about SmallRig's past with batteries, they've been making really good V-mount batteries for a while now that people swear by. So this SmallRig battery comes for 3 different camera brands. It comes from Sony, it comes from Canon, and it comes from Fuji. Obviously I shoot with Sony, so I'm only going to be discussing the Sony battery. It's encased in this beautiful blue plastic with a USB-C port right on it for charging directly, but it can also charge using the regular pins method. Generally, I wouldn't recommend putting any third-party batteries into your camera. At worst, it'll damage your camera, and at best, it's just gonna give you worse battery life or degraded performance over time. But with SmallRig's track record, I decided I'd give this one a try, because I actually do believe that it would have quality cells inside. So in order to test that, I put it to the test comparing the SmallRig batteries to a regular OEM Sony battery. Now, I don't have 2 identical camera setups with identical lenses and identical bodies. So I tested the Sony battery and the SmallRig battery in both my Sony a7R Mark III and my Sony a7R Mark IV, and did them side by side and swapped batteries over once they had charged, just so I could average the results and get a ballpark figure of what you can expect with these batteries compared to the Sony batteries. Comparing the Sony battery to the SmallRig battery and averaging out to minimize the effect of the camera setup, the Sony battery got 2 hours and 19 minutes, while the SmallRig battery on average got 2 hours and 10 minutes. And this is recording 4K 30 at full frame. And those battery numbers, while for video, will translate to photos as well. Even though these SmallRig batteries have 5% more capacity, I found the Sony batteries in my testing will get about 6% more runtime than these SmallRig batteries. Now that doesn't mean that SmallRig is lying or anything, it just means that Sony's cells are more efficient, they probably don't heat up as much, they just last that little bit longer than the SmallRig batteries. When I was doing these tests as well, I found something really interesting with this SmallRig battery. It seems that there may be like a reporting issue on the cameras. Now, I obviously don't have the latest Sony cameras with the newer menu system, but I found when this battery got to 0, it would actually stay on the no battery sign for about 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes on my occasions of testing, that it would say it has 0 charge, but is very clearly functioning. Whereas the Sony batteries would do a similar thing, but it would only last 5, maybe 10 minutes at most on the no battery symbol. I don't know if the Sony batteries aren't reporting this battery state of charge correctly, but it's a bit unnerving. I wouldn't ever, in a situation where I need to get a shot, rely on being on 0% battery and keep shooting. While it does have a very similar runtime, it actually is really unnerving using these batteries if you need it in a critical instance. How the battery runs down is a massive consideration, but also its charge curve charging back up is also a massive consideration. I found in my testing, as you can see on this graph here, the Sony has a way more consistent charge curve. It charges pretty linearly from 0 to 100%. Obviously it slows down on the upper end, but it's generally pretty consistent when you put it on the charge. Now, charging with USB-C, I found that this SmallRig battery has a little bit of a weird charging curve. It starts off really slow and really ramps up from around 15–20% to around 70% or so, and then tapers out. Now, what that means in real terms is when it's really low, it's gonna take a little bit to get up, but once it's sort of in that middle range, it charges really quick compared to the Sony. It charges about 14 minutes slower than the official Sony battery on its official Sony charger compared to the SmallRig battery with USB-C. I think some of the downsides of the charging curve via USB-C for this camera comes down to all the charging infrastructure for the USB-C charging needing to be inside the battery. I found charging via USB-C, the battery does get warm to the touch. It's never hot, like burn your hands hot, but it does get warm to the touch, whereas on the official Sony charger, it doesn't get warm at all. So it clearly isn't charging as fast as the official Sony battery on a charger. Speaking of the USB-C port, that is a super handy feature. Normally when I'm on big events or I'm shooting throughout a full day and I'm running through all of my batteries, I normally cycle through 6 Sony full frame batteries, and every single time one gets depleted, I'll put it in the newer charger, the dual port charger, connected to a battery bank. And that will charge up like a few batteries before I run through the whole 6. Now this battery kind of solves that, because that newer charger, the batteries can easily fall out and stop charging, which isn't good, especially if you chuck it in a backpack where it's moving around. Whereas this, with a direct USB-C connection, I can plug it straight in and I don't have to worry about it being unplugged. I know that it's going to be charging that whole time. I know a lot of people's first instinct as well, when they see a battery with a USB-C port on the bottom, they can think, oh, I can use it as a dummy battery. I'll plug it into the camera, I'll plug a cable into the bottom, and I'll act as a dummy battery. That's not the case. SmallRig on their Q&As recommends you do not do that. So I would still be charging through the USB-C port of the camera if you wanted to top up the battery while you're shooting. And that brings me to my final point about this battery, the price. This battery is about half the price of a Sony official battery, but has about the same performance and more features inside. As long as you're comfortable with some of the downsides of it not reporting the battery correctly and running a little bit longer than you feel like you should be, then this battery is absolutely perfect. Especially compared to other third-party Sony batteries, I just think you can't look past this one if you're looking for a bit of a bargain compared to the original. I haven't personally tested them myself, but I'd say other third-party batteries probably use lower quality cells than this SmallRig one, and over time will degrade way faster than the SmallRig one or the original Sony battery. So if you'd like to save yourself a good bargain, you should check out this video here, where I talk about the Revo ring, which is going to save you so much money buying step up and step down rings.